Hello and welcome. My name is Michelle. I am your emotional resilience coach. Thank you for joining me today. Please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, the notifications button. Today we're going to talk about crying. Do you find it really difficult to cry? Do you find that it's just too hard, or you're used to not crying so it just doesn't come naturally to you? It feels like it kind of just sticks here in your chest and a lot has to happen. You've got to be exhausted, maybe unwell, overwhelmed before those tears start flowing. You are not alone. Crying for me to this day is something I still struggle with at times. And I write about it in my book, Who Are You Beneath the Pain? I'm going to just read you a little excerpt and we're going to talk about the importance of crying and that crying is actually really good for you. It was really difficult for me to cry, as I'll explain here, because my emotions were not acceptable. If I cried, I was called manipulative and told that my tears were just crocodile tears. I would cringe and hate myself for my tears while I was screamed at and berated. I felt that my tears made everything worse. Does this sound familiar? Have you been there? Have you felt that you just can't trust yourself or the people around you to let your tears go? So you've trained yourself to not cry. I felt he liked to see how far he could push me, and perhaps if I did not cry, he would stop pushing. This was my stepfather that I'm talking about. I was so aversive to crying that to this day, I struggle with it. I would breathe in and hold my breath and push those tears down. For years, crying came with immense guilt because I felt like I was being manipulative. He usually sneered at me when calling me that. I was not going to be labeled that. I was probably around 8 or 9 when I seriously got to work on not crying, which is unfortunate because crying is one of the greatest mechanisms we have in self-soothing and easing our pain. Tears release all sorts of hormones to help us cope, and from young, I was cutting myself off from this ability. I was suppressing what was a natural response. Our tears help our body move into the parasympathetic nervous system and assists in calming us down. So essentially it helps us move into a state of rest and digest. It helps us to relax. It may take several minutes before this is effective, but I was not allowing myself even a minute of this. I don't know if this relates to you, if this is something you've been through, but I needed to learn when those tears were coming up, and I still have to practice to this day, to not push them down, to not suppress them, to allow them. Recently, I was at a funeral of a dear friend of mine's husband who had passed away, and it was a very emotionally taxing place to be. It was obviously full of grief and full of sorrow, and there were a lot of tears. And in the past, I would not allow myself to cry at all. But in this situation, I leaned into it. As I felt the tears come, I would say to myself, you are allowed to cry. You are safe now. And I allowed the tears to just flow. It is something I still have to consciously work on and allow myself, give myself permission almost to do, because for most of my life, I would not allow myself to cry, to the point where I was seen as being hard, hostile, without feeling. Meanwhile, behind all of that, there was obviously a lot of pain. I found that at times I could only ever really cry, and sometimes still to this day, was when I was alone, when there was nobody around to judge my tears. Then I was able to really let that sobbing, heart-sore pain out. So some of the benefits of crying would be, as I said, it can be very self-soothing, all right? Those hormones that are released that allows us to get rid of that pent-up stress, pain, tension, anxiety, whatever it is that's building up inside of us. The tears allow it a place to go. It allows us to release it. It makes us feel lighter. So often after we've cried and we've cried and we've cried ourselves out, we do tend to feel lighter. We've released so much of that pain that we're carrying inside of us. It removes toxins and and stress hormones. I can't read my own handwriting. It releases toxins and stress hormones. It lowers blood pressure, boosts your mood. If you are crying around somebody who you trust, it forges that bond, that connection, that empathy is elicited out of them. And as human beings, generally, when we see someone in pain, we see someone hurt, we see someone sad, there is this bond, this connection, because we understand that feeling all too well. We know what it is to feel sad, to feel sorrow, to feel heartbroken. And so we connect with each other. So it allows for greater connections because we're vulnerable, we're open and we're vulnerable. And I know that that can be incredibly scary for a lot of us, but it allows us to bond and cement good relationships. And last but not least, it helps you to sleep better. So often when we have anxiety, stress, a lot going on our plate, and our minds are just racing, it is not a bad idea to take some deep breaths, find a safe, comfortable place, and allow yourself to cry. For many, many years, what I used to try and get that trigger going was I would listen to sad music just to allow myself that space. Some people watch sad movies, something that helps them trigger their tears, because sometimes it feels too hard to cry for yourself. You feel like you're being self-indulgent, but you know and you recognize you need that release. So find a medium, a source, a way in which will allow you to open up and let those tears flow. And my cousin and I, we often joke, there is nothing better than having a good cry and then a good sleep. When you wake up, you feel better if you've been able to relax into it and not fight it. Often as well, sometimes when we've cried ourselves to sleep, we wake up with a headache, we're puffy-eyed, we're red, we're nasally, and that's just because there's been a lot of resistance with those tears. There's been a lot of fighting, a lot of anger, a lot of just being unkind to ourselves through that crying process. When we just release and lean into it and allow ourselves the opportunity to just cry and have no guilt, no fighting, no judgment, no criticism, none of that, and you just cry and finish, and then you're able to just sleep and sleep thoroughly, then oftentimes you wake up and you do feel better and refreshed. If you're not, it's because most likely you were fighting with yourself when you were crying. I hope this helps. I hope that I've given you some ways and means to allow you to release those tears and to lean into the sadness, because the tears aren't the enemy. It allows us to just find an outlet for the pain and sorrow that is buried deep down inside. Please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, the notifications button. Come on over to Instagram, say hi to me there. I'm Michelle at the Emotional Resilience Coach. If there's any questions, anything you want clarified, anything you want to know and understand deeper, do let me know in the DMs and I will let you know here on YouTube. Have an empowered day.